In this video, we're going to be talking about getting and setting dates. In the previous video, we talked about how to use the date object with the current or a specified date and time. In this video, we're going to be talking about how you can use the different methods available to the date object in order to get and set dates. So let's get right to it. So first of all, let's talk about getting dates. So in this case, let's define a date. Var date equals new date. It will contain the current date and time. In this case, let's say, for example, it is like this. Tuesday, April 10, 2018, 22:30:53 GMT 0000. It also has a millisecond, but it's not displayed here. But internally, the JavaScript date is accurate up to the millisecond as well. So in this case, we have a date object with an example date time, which is this. Now, the date object has a lot of methods available that allows you to get the date in different formats or get different sections of the date as well. The first method that we're going to be looking at is the getTime method. Now, det.getTime will give you the number of milliseconds since the Unix epoch for that specific date. And in this case, this is actually about 1.5 trillion milliseconds since the Unix epoch. So if you have a date object, you can use the getTime method in order to convert the date into the number of milliseconds since the Unix epoch. But there are a lot of other methods available as well. So using the same date object from the previous example, let's take a look at a few more of them. First, we have the getDay method. So using the date object, which we stored and created in the variable date in the previous example, if we type in .getDay, then we get 2. Now remember, in JavaScript, dates start at 0, which is Sunday. So 2 calculates to Tuesday. And if you remember from the previous example, the date in the previous example was indeed Tuesday. So using the getDay method, you can retrieve the day of a specific date object. We also have the getDate method. The getDate method allows you to retrieve the date. So in this case, the date was 10 April. So in this case, it's 10. We also have the month. In this case, .getMonth method will retrieve 3. And because JavaScript months start from 0, 3 is actually April. And if you remember, in the previous example, the actual date was April 10th, 2018. And if you remember from the previous example, the actual date was 10th April 2018. So you can use the getMonth method in order to retrieve the month of a date object. We also have the getFullYear method. Date.getFullYear will give you the full year of the date. In this case, it's 2018, like in the previous example. We also have getHours. So in this case, .getHours gives us 22, because remember in the previous example, the hours was 22. Of course, we have getMinutes, which gives us the minute of the date object, which is 30. And we have getSeconds as well, which is 53 seconds in this case. And although we didn't see it in the previous example, we also have getMilliseconds. In this case, we can see that the milliseconds for this specific date object is 921. Now we just saw 8 different methods for 8 different portions of the date object, starting with day, and then date, month, year, hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. Now there are UTC versions of all these methods as well. In this case, they look something like this. So instead of getDay, you type in getUTCDay, and then getUTCDate, and so on. We have getUTCMonth, getUTCFullYear, getUTCHours, getUTCMinutes, getUTCSeconds, and of course, getUTCMilliseconds. Now, in this case, because we're assuming that the date object we created has a time zone of UTC, the UTC methods result in the same values as we just saw. It doesn't really change it. But in case the code is executed from a different time zone where the new date object returns their local time zone, you can use the getUTCDay in order to actually convert the date object and get the UTCDay and all the UTC based values in here. Now in this case, all the values returned are the same. But in the case where the new date object is created inside our user's browser in a different time zone, then the value of the date object will be based on that local time zone and not UTC. And in that case, using the UTC methods will return the different results. Especially the UTC hours is what is usually different, because the hours is different depending on the time zone. So in this case, if your date object created has a different time zone, you can use get UTC hours in order to retrieve the time in UTC time and not the local time. But in this case, we're assuming that the code is executed in a UTC time zone, that's why the results are the same. But in the case where the dates will be executed in a local time zone, these methods, especially date UTC hours, will return different times based on the local time zone. Now, just like using the get methods, we can get different portions of the date object in different formats. We can also set different portions of the date object separately. In this case, we'll start again with the new date object. So var date equals new date. In this case, the example will be the same as previous one. So Tuesday, April 10, 2018, 22:30:53 GMT. And again, the millisecond is not displayed here, but we know that the millisecond is 921 from the previous example. Now, the first method that we can look at is the set time methods. So this is basically the same as get time method, but it's opposite. It's the set method. So it's the set equivalent of the get time methods. So the get time method tells us the number of milliseconds since the Unix epoch for a specific date. And the set time method can be used to set the number of milliseconds since the Unix epoch. So you can actually use it to change the value of the date object. In this case, we're inputting minus 86 million. So in this case, you can type in a positive number for a number of milliseconds after the Unix epoch. You can also type in 0 for the Unix epoch and a negative number for the number of milliseconds before Unix epoch. So you can input negative numbers as the milliseconds as well. In this case, date.setTime minus 86.4 million gives us 1 day before the Unix epoch. So Unix epoch is 1 January 1970. In this case, minus 86.4 milliseconds, which is minus 1 day, gives us December 31, Wednesday, 1969, UTC time, midnight. So you can use the set time method to actually manipulate the value of the date object. You can specify the milliseconds in order to create a new date time. Now, most of the methods we saw previously also had their set versions. For example, we saw the getDate method, and we also actually have the setDate method. So just like the getDate gives you the date, the setDate can be used to actually set or change the date. So in this case, we have the setDate method, and we're changing the date from 1 day before Unix epoch to 14. So in this case, instead of being 31 December, it'll be 14 December. We also have set month. So in this case, we're setting the month to 8. We also have set full year. In this case, it'll be 2003. Set hours, we can also set the hours, then minutes, of course seconds, and again milliseconds. Now, after using all these methods on the date object, what's the value of the date object right now? Well, the value of the date object has changed to September 14, 2003, 21:56:13 UTC time. So all the methods that we applied actually changed the date object from 1 day before Unix epoch to Sunday, September 14, 2003, 21:56:13, and of course it also have 593 milliseconds, although it's not showing here. And that is how you can use the set methods in order to actually modify and change the value of the date object. And of course, all the set methods also have their UTC equivalents. So set UTC date, also have set UTC month, set UTC full year, set UTC hours, set UTC minutes, set UTC seconds, and of course set UTC milliseconds. And again, because our date object is actually created in the UTC time zone, these methods are more or less equivalent. They don't really change anything that much. But in the case where the new date object is actually created in a time zone other than UTC, Then using the normal non-UTC set methods, we'll set the date and time in the local time zone. But using the UTC methods, you can set the time and date based on UTC time and date. So in this case, although the result is the same, but if the time zone was different, the UTC methods could be used to set the time and date based on UTC time and not the local time zone. Now you can also format the date outputs. So when you have a date object, you're not just limited to outputting it in the standard ISO format. You can actually change the format and output the date in a different way and style. For example, in this case, we're creating a new date again, so var date equals new date, which in this case will be again the same date as the previous examples. And now let's take a look at different date output methods. First, we have the toDateString method. The toDateString method will output the date portion of a date object in a human-readable format. So in this case, it results in Tuesday, April 10, 2018. So the first part of the example above. We also have the toTimeString, which outputs the time portion of the date object, also in a human-readable format. So in this case, it's 22:58:55 UTC time. So by using the toDateString and the toTimeString, you can extract the date portion or the time portion from a date object. We also have toISOString. The toISOString method can be used to output the date in a standard ISO format, which looks kind of like this. It starts with the year, and then with a dash or a hyphen we have the month, and then the date. So in this case it's 2018-4-10, and then the time is specified with capital T, and then we specify the time 22:58:55.309, which is the number of milliseconds, and then finally Z. Z means it's UTC time. We also have date.toUTCString, which outputs it like the UTC string that we just saw. In this case, it's Tuesday, 10 April 2018, 22:58:55 GMT. So using these methods, you can change the output of a date object and specify how you want the date or time to be displayed.